Storytelling Podcast, episode number 1. Welcome to the Storytelling Podcast, where everything's fictional, even you. And now, here are your hosts, two guys and a girl who hate Game of Thrones, Garrett, Zach, and Crystal. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Storytelling Podcast, the podcast that's all about fiction, fiction, and more fiction, and telling the truth through the medium of lies. I am your host, Garrett Robinson, author of Hit Girls, Non-Zombie, and the Touch trilogy. With me today, as they will hopefully continue to be in the future, are Z.C. Bolger, author of Danny Calloway and the Puzzle House, and Crystal Logothetis, author of Via Rosal. What's up, guys?
Hey!
Hey, how's it going?
Has anybody had enough fun with technical issues today?
It was fun.
It was fun.
It was so much fun.
Took us, what, an hour and 20 minutes?
Yeah.
You know.
Zach really needs to get his act together and figure out what technology is all about.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
No, it was good. It was good that, you know, the technical issues were all equally divided among the three of us. You know, like each of us had something going on. Crystal's microphone wasn't working.
Or her cam,
Zach,
or her headphones.
Zach couldn't hear Crystal's microphone.
But it wasn't my fault.
I couldn't be heard by Crystal.
Crystal, we couldn't see Crystal because her camera wasn't working.
Yeah, okay. I hear you.
No,
well, here we are.
Equally
Evenly distributed.
Evenly
Exactly.
distributed. That's right.
Exactly.
All right, so let's start off with a little bit of introduction to everybody. I'm Garrett Robinson. I am a self-published author and an independent film writer and director working in Los Angeles, like everybody else in Los Angeles. I'm in film. Just got into the whole self-published books route recently. Came to it from film, taking my film ideas, turning them into books, that sort of thing, and that's who I am. Zach, go.
I am Z.C. Bolger is my pen name, and I write the Danny Calloway series, which the first book will be coming out in about a month or two from now, and Garrett's actually my editor. I am an indie author, and I've started a company called Story Road Publishing, which is helping indie authors get published, and, you know, I just want to help people out. I live in Miami. I don't really care if people know where I am, because I'm welcome to stalkers. Unlike other people we know. And I seem to be glowing.
Unlike certain people on other podcasts. And you do seem to be glowing.
I am literally glowing here, so.
Exactly unlike that same individual on that other podcast.
That's right.
He radiates darkness.
Very dark.
And Crystal?
All right. Well, my name is Crystal, and my pen name is V.C. Cole. And I write a little bit of everything, actually. Via Rosal is a historical romance novel. I went through a phase where I was really into that, so I wrote a full-length novel that explores a little bit about telepathy and the way the communication between men and women work. And currently I'm really into science fiction and young adult, so I'm working on 2 different stories, and I love writing. It's one of the things I like to do the most, and I live in Glendale, and I happen to know Zach, and I know Garrett, and I thought this would be a fun thing to do.
Yeah, it was like a weird conflagration of forces where I've known Zach my whole life.
Literally.
And then, literally, 20 days old, mom's pregnant together and the whole deal. And then,
wow.
Yeah, like that long. He's godfather of my kids. And then you two ended up on a cruise ship in the Caribbean together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And met that way. And then I know a girl named Nicole who was like, oh, you've got to meet this friend of mine, Crystal. And, you know, we never ended up meeting, but then it was this whole weird crossflow thing.
And then we ended up getting introduced via Zach. So
yeah, exactly.
It was cool.
He was
it
like,
was
Crystal.
meant to be.
It was.
Well, you know, what happened was Garrett, you know, Garrett and I were talking about this podcast, and he's like, we need a third person. And I totally agreed. And we listened to another podcast and they have 3 guys. And we're like, no, we need a fucking sexy chick. Yeah. And I was like, Crystal, we should get Crystal. And she's a writer, so it works. So,
well, thank you. I'm honored. I'll have to, wear my Hooters outfit or something.
Oh,
so
I don't disappoint. One.
I don't have a Hooters outfit. I do not have a Hooters outfit. No.
Your husband would be okay with that, right?
Yeah. The whole cosplay thing works for him. So.
Oh yeah, and that. Funny story that I won't get into right now. Said too much already, and I don't know where I was going with that. What were we saying? Cosplay, Hooters.
Hot chicks. Crystal's hot.
Hot chicks, Crystal's hot. Yeah, no, don't.
Talk more about Crystal.
Let's talk more about how hot Crystal is.
Anything to steer away from my malfunctioning technical software and everything else.
No, but actually, when we figured out, at first it was just going to be me and Zach, and then we figured out that we definitely wanted a third because occasionally Zach and I will just fall into those weird periods of silence, and it's like, I don't know what to say next. So we wanted a third person, but it was important to me that was a girl, woman, lady, whatever. Female, because
bitch.
It's a totally.
You're gonna get it, Zach.
It's a different perspective, and like a lot of podcasts that I listen to.
No, I'm sorry. You need a different perspective.
No, I mean it is.
You picked the wrong chick. Because I think like a guy. I talk like a guy. I think we should end this here. If
she has a penis.
I'm sorry. I have an imaginary.
Yeah. Later. Oh, yeah, I actually used to be a man. No.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
No, but I did want that other perspective because I've started listening to a bunch of different podcasts, and, like, to be frank, they're either dudes, like a pair of dudes or 3 dudes or whatever, or it's a woman's podcast about, like, women's issues. Yeah, exactly. It's
and
like
there's no... Something interesting, too, is that if you look at a lot of different genres, for example, romance, the first guy with a guy name that didn't use a female pen name that became really well known in romance is actually Nicholas Sparks. And I used to read in my teens a lot of romance, and I didn't want to read anything written by a guy. If I saw a romance book and it looked good and I saw that it was written by a guy, I instantly didn't like it because I felt like the perspective would be too different and I just wouldn't enjoy the book. And when it comes to science fiction, most of the writers are male, which is why I've used a pen name that is just my initials, because I feel like if it's a female name, there are going to be a lot of people that don't really want to read from a female point of view, and they're not going to pick up my book just on that basis.
Yeah, it's like erotica.
Exactly.
People don't read erotica from
written
men.
by a dude. Yeah. No, women read erotica written by a dude.
Is there erotica written by dudes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but they have pen names as women.
I mean...
exactly. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, erotica aside... should we dive into the topic? We haven't even been going that long, but I feel like we should get into the topic. Our topic for the day, which is the title of this episode of the podcast, is Beginning Your Story. And that was chosen because this is the beginning of our story. See what I did there?
I saw what you did there.
Very clever, very clever.
I did what you saw there. But it's an important thing. Very, very important. One of my favorite books for storytellers in general. It's written for screenwriters, but it's really applicable to anything. Writing books. Somebody wrote an adaptation of it for song. They wrote this whole blog post about how you could adapt it for song, and I'll talk about it for 5 minutes without saying what it is. It's Save the Cat, which is just a fantastic book. And he devotes a large part of an entire chapter to the opening image of your movie. The first thing that that your audience sees, it's supposed to make them hunch down in the theater seat and sort of lean back and be like, all right, I know what I'm in for, and I'm in for the ride. Like, you got to hook them in right away. And it's the same thing when you're writing a book.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I totally agree on that. I was, when you told me that this was going to be our subject for today, I decided, I was like, well, I was thinking, what books do I know of that I don't like the beginnings of? Because there wasn't any that I was like, oh, I hate the beginning of this book, you know?
Twilight.
That entire, I got halfway through Twilight and then I threw the book
beginning
away.
can't be that bad though if so many people make it through, because I think that if the beginning isn't good, you're not going to make it through the book. And I have one exception of an amazing book that I read, and thankfully I was stuck in an airplane because the first 50 pages sucked. First 50 pages, and that was The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and it's a 1,000-page book and it's fantastic, but the first pages suck. The beginning of the book is just horrendous. It's so slow, and I think a lot of authors, including myself, we struggle with balancing out putting the scene there and describing things enough so that the person knows where things are coming from, what kind of shape the story is gonna take place, but at the same time not overwhelming the reader with too much information and not enough action, which I think happens a lot.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. And like what I was saying was, I didn't know what books I didn't like the beginnings of, so I started Googling bad book beginnings, and yeah, and I didn't actually even find any that I could think of, but then certain ones started popping into my head, and I was like there's one book that I just fucking love, but the beginning of it, I wanted to shoot myself because I wasn't like, and you might totally disagree with me, and we probably won't get any people watching this podcast because of this, but Ender's Game, I fucking hated the beginning of that book.
I did too.
You were going to say that. Fuck you
I
both.
did too.
Fuck you both.
Hated the beginning of that
both
book.
of you.
And here's
I did
why.
too.
And here's why.
And I loved Ender's Game.
It's one of my favorite. It's my favorite sci-fi book.
But you really have to give it a chance because the beginning sucks.
The reason why I didn't like the beginning, Garrett, and that's fine. You can tell me why I'm
just sitting here. I'm waiting until you're done.
We'll talk about Lord of the Rings later. So
I'm gonna kill you.
No, but the reason why I didn't like the beginning was because I suddenly jumped into some kid, and obviously it's in the future, and he's sitting on in a doctor's office, and they're talking about taking this monitor off of him, and all this stuff, and I'm like, I'm thrown into this universe where I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Like, I had zero idea what was happening. Now, I do totally agree. When I go back and read the book again, I love the beginning because I know the story and I know the universe. But because it was the first time reading it when I was 16 or 15 or something like that, when I read those first, I think it was the first chapter or two, I was totally thrown off to where I was. And that's why I didn't like the beginning of Ender's Game when I first read it.
Okay. Now, the reason that I loved the beginning of that, and see, now that's another thing. Depending on your genre, depending on your writing style or filmmaking style or whatever,
right,
your beginning can appeal to different people. Because when I read sci-fi, and I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that I read a lot more sci-fi than both of you combined. Just going to toss that out there.
I don't know about that.
Off base. Oh, yeah.
I'm calling erotica.
I doubt it.
So.
I
don't read erotica.
I start reading, and Ender is feeling, and Ender is having the monitor removed from the back of his neck. And I'm immediately like, why does he have a monitor in the back of his neck? And then people start calling him Third, and I'm like, Third what? And then it explains third child, and I'm like, in this society, people can't even have a third child, and so he creates these immediate mysteries about his universe, and he doesn't sit there and explain his universe. He doesn't say Ender was the third child and that was illegal. He has people call him a dirty third because you're not supposed to have a third child in that society. That's why it's an awesome beginning to me. But different strokes for different folks. Folks.
Right.
I think that it depends on the reader too. Some readers are a little bit less cognitive, I guess you could say. They're lazier, and things need to be explained a little bit more. But sometimes it works. I think as long as the author isn't chewing things for you and feeding them to you, it works. And a really good example is actually Scott Westerfeld's Uglies. It's a young adult sci-fi, and it's set in a totally different world with totally different rules. where kids basically grow up without adults, and when they turn 16, they undergo this massive surgery, and then everybody's pretty. There's no such thing as aging. Everybody pretty much stays at a certain age. And he
Don't
has a way. What?
Yeah. Oh.
Don't give away the plot.
No, I won't. But it's an interesting. It's a different concept, you know. And
actually, Crystal, if I can interject.
Yes.
At any moment, we may accidentally spoil something. We've done a couple of test runs of this podcast, even before all the audio issues and everything. If we do, we're tremendously sorry, especially if you're David Wright, who Crystal ruined the ending of Life of Pi. Don't say anything, Crystal. But anyway, just so anybody knows, if we do, we're tremendously sorry. But if we realize we're about to give something away, we will try and say spoiler alert, etc.
Well, I was only talking about the beginning of the book, so we're good.
Okay, good.
But I'm glad you mentioned that because I tend to do that a lot.
I tend to do that a lot.
Yes. But anyways, all I was trying to say is that, you know, this author, he kind of really describes things and you get what's going on from the beginning, even though it's such a different world, but it's fine. It works. And I like that because, you know, if I feel lost from page number 1 or 2 on the book and I don't know what the heck is going on, unless it's beautifully written and I can tell that it's like, it makes sense, it's congruent, I'm going to put the book down. I'm going to assume it's just one of those horribly edited books that just suck ass, and I can name a few that are actually out there filling the bookshelves of Barnes and Nobles. Are you sure I can't mention the names?
No, the only book we're allowed to trash is Twilight.
Oh.
And Eclipse and New Moon and all of that because it's socially acceptable to do so.
Now, which of you guys have actually read all those books?
Twilight?
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's a fly. I was batting the fly. I was batting. Look, guys, I was 19, okay? I was 19.
Let me rephrase that question. Which of you males have actually read all those books?
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
You guys are lying. You know way too much about Twilight. Every time this topic comes up, Twilight is so stupid.
Crystal.
Remember that time on page 57 when they make out and it's just so retarded?
Crystal, I read half of the first Twilight book because I had students at the time who were super excited about it. Gave it, half a read, and I couldn't. If I heard her describing his smoldering eyes one more time, I was gonna fucking shoot myself. So I stopped reading it. Garrett, on the other hand,
I read the entire series, and I'll tell you my excuse because I do make an excuse for this. I am a very fast reader, like very fast. So I could blow through all the crappy parts and then get to the vampires fighting werewolves and or other vampires, which was actually kind of cool. Like, if I can blow through the first 200 pages of Edward, I love you, Bella, I love you, but I'm bad for you. Stay away from me. If I can blow through that, and then I can get to Jake, I'm going to punch you in the face. Oh, let's have sex. That's okay.
Right.
So that was the way that I read those books.
No, that's a very ill-founded justification because there's so little in those giant books of what you just described that you were reading them
especially
for.
in the first one.
Yeah, especially in the first one. The last one was kind of okay.
Crystal.
And also, sorry, Zach, but let me just wrap up. The reason that I really liked the third one and the fourth one at the time that I read them was when I read them, my wife was pregnant with our first child. And in the third and fourth books, she and Edward are like planning to get married, and then they do, and then she gets pregnant and has a baby and the whole deal.
But you had to read the first two.
If that's a spoiler for anybody, then I'm sorry because the movies have been coming out for a long ass time, and I don't give a fuck about spoiling Twilight. I'm sorry.
I just have to share my favorite. I actually have no problem with Garrett reading the books. I honestly don't. If people like
the
them,
fact that you're saying it means that you've thought about it.
No, I just I actually have thought about, like, do I care? But I don't.
Did it affect your relationship for a little bit there?
A little bit. But my favorite story of Garrett is when he went to go buy the book. And he was with
it
his
like
wife,
bring Tampax for your first girlfriend or something?
Crystal, he was with his wife, and he's like, honey, can you buy this? And she's like, just go up and buy it. And he's like, no, can you buy it? And he's like, sure. He walks up with the book, puts it down, and goes, this is for him. And he goes, "Oh."
She threw me under the bus.
That is so funny.
Favorite story. Crystal, open the chat window, by the way.
Chat window.
Yeah.
We're all getting into our chat windows and shit.
Where is the chat window? There it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, okay, going back to the subject of movies. Movies in particular offer an amazing ability to not only give people a sense of what they're getting into, but to create like subtext and a sort of foreshadowing for what's going to come in the future. And actually, no, this is applicable to movies and books, but I'm thinking of two movies in particular that have these opening shots that are awesome, but in different ways. And the first one is Star Wars. Anybody remember the first shot of Star Wars? Not the scrolling title.
The stars that flash through.
Okay, it's the scrolling title that goes, up the screen like dun, 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 dun.
To the ship, right?
And then it pans down, and there's that little rebel ship flying through space.
Oh yes.
And then this fucking gigantic Star Destroyer flies in and starts shooting at it with lasers, and you're just like, holy shit, what's happening? And it's like, boom, you're in space, there's spaceships, there's lasers. It's like George Lucas is just hitting you in the head with, this is space opera, this is space opera. So that's kind of a shock and awe tactic of using an opening scene. A much more subtle and foreshadowy way is The Matrix. The Matrix comes in, and you have one green letter, and then another, and another. And I don't know about you, but the first time I saw The Matrix, I was trying to track what the letter was saying. I was trying to see what all these things were, and then they all melded. And so you've got computer program, you've got, stylistically, you've got, this movie's going to be green. Basically, everything's going to be green. Every fucking thing is going to be green. And then you've also got the audience already trying to figure out what's going on. They're trying to pierce the code. They're trying to solve and crack the mystery, which is what Neo then spends the entire first act of the movie doing.
Right.
So,
yeah, totally. Now, talking about movies with incredible openings, the one that comes straight to mind for me is Star Trek, the new J.J. Abrams movie, the first one. That opening scene, okay, with the starship coming through the big black hole and the whole fight scene, and if you haven't seen it, here's a spoiler alert, so you can just pause. His father dies right in the beginning of that movie, and it changes. Someone's father, dies, and it's like it sets up that it's just like so well done,
right?
That like you're suddenly like exactly where you are, and in the first 10 minutes of the movie. But I just thought that was a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I really like that movie. I have to admit, I have a bad memory when it comes to openings of movies. I just know that they either grab my attention or they don't.
Right.
I remember one of the movies that I was really impressed with right from the beginning. I mean, from the first 10 seconds was Looper, actually. And I didn't know anything about it. And usually I like to read or watch a trailer because I don't like going in completely blind, not knowing what the movie's about, because then I feel like I might miss the first few minutes, not understand it. But in Looper, from the very beginning, you kind of get what's going on, and you really see the world building, and it puts you there. And I think that's important too, because a lot of movies, they might have a really good concept, but if the world building is crappy or the graphics are crappy or something just doesn't work, it totally throws you out of the movie.
Yeah, right. Definitely. So, what was the beginning? What was the beginning of that movie? I totally forget.
I don't remember either. But, you know what? It's basically there's a guy in the field, which is the young character, and then he shoots somebody with his gun.
Right.
And he's looking at his clock, and it's ticking, and then he shoots him. And that could be a scene from like the 1950s.
Yeah, right. Except for the teleporting.
Exactly.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
It's not teleporting. It's never mind.
Continue.
Time travel, but don't think about it because...
Now, okay, so now I want to bring up another thing, which is that your opening scene needs to be awesome and it needs to be beautiful, but it needs to contain something to draw your audience, whether it's a viewer or a reader or whatever, it needs to draw them in. Now, for me, Ender's Game drew me in with the mystery of whatever, whereas you guys didn't get drawn in till the like more active action parts much later, which is fine. But if you have an opening scene that's just all like action, ooh, flashy, da 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 da, then nobody's going to give a fuck. You know, nobody. It's like, okay, things are exploding. Why do I care if things are exploding?
Right.
Like, you've got to have something. You establish your protagonists and you make the audience care about them right off the bat, so that then they care when the car next to him explodes, because it's like, oh, is he all right? That kind of thing.
Like Star Trek. They had in the beginning of that movie, there's crazy fight scene, but they have a whole family storyline going on during the fight.
Right.
You know.
And the other thing that really snatches your attention in the beginning of that one, snatch, is the captain is referred to as Kirk. Now, if you're going and seeing that movie, I'm sorry, you already know who Kirk is, and you know that's not James
the
Kirk.
Actor.
Right. So that like hooks you. It's like, wait, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I ran into in the book that I'm writing right now, Hit Girls. The opening scene is the girls go into this advertising agency, and they're assassins, so I don't feel bad telling you that they're there to kill somebody. But the whole first part of the book is all about them like trying to get in and trying to do this and trying to do that. So they kind of just come in and like sit in the reception for a little bit while they're scoping it out. That's kind of fucking boring, honestly. So I had to put in some sort of dialogue that indicated that these two were here for nefarious purposes, which turns out to be killing somebody. And I
very brutally.
Very, very brutally. Actually, Zach, this is funny. Zach was going to be one of my advanced readers. He was going to read the book beforehand and give me any typos or notes or whatever. And then he emailed me after a couple of days after I sent him the book, and he's like, I can't read this.
It's halfway through the third chapter.
Well, was it that gory?
It was fucking gross. I was like, dude, I can't. I'm a young adult reader. I can't read this shit.
It's not really gory necessarily. It's just cruel.
It's bloodlust. It's bloodlust,
yeah.
and that's what I didn't like about it. For me,
there's
it's written so well.
The two main characters.
I don't know why, but Pulp Fiction is coming to mind right now. That beginning scene.
It's more like Kill Bill.
Okay.
To take another movie, where like the bride, you know, she's like cutting people's feet off, and then afterwards she's like, "Your limbs stay with me; they're mine now," and everything. It's sort of it's that level of fucked upness, but like more.
Yeah.
The main characters are these two sisters, and one of them is 24 and one of them is 14. And they're both assassins. And the younger one witnessed the murder of their parents, so and that drove her fucking psychotic. And she like desperately wants to kill. She has like an actual physical psychotic need to kill people and see them writhe in pain and everything. So in the first episode, she tortures somebody to death with a butterfly knife, and it's not pleasant. Wait, dude, Zach, you would shit yourself if you got to episode 3.
Yeah, I have no interest. Now, here's the other thing, though. Talking about Garrett's books is that he writes a book called Non-Zombie, and you know it's about you know a guy who becomes a zombie, but he's not really a zombie. Like he has free thought and you know control and everything, but he's a zombie.
Zombie body, human mind.
Right, exactly. And the beginning of that book really hooked me because it's talking about this guy who, you know, he's a nerd, he's overweight, you know, he's just like in everyday life you look at him and go, God, what a, you know, dumbass, or, you know, he's so lazy, you know, who is this guy?
Yeah.
He's a loser, exactly. But in this zombie apocalypse world, he has been training on video games for, you know, for the last 15 years, whatever, and he, you know, stocking up on shit. And he was ready. And he's the guy that you want to hook up with. And I'm suddenly like, oh, I want to hear about this, you know, this storyline, you know. And you're introduced to him before he becomes a zombie. And I texted Garrett. I was like, dude, he hasn't become a zombie yet, but I'm so attached to this guy. I really don't want him to become a zombie because I want to see the rest of this thing. So that's another good example of that.
Well,
That's
I think
my
we should
next
spend
read.
the entire rest of the podcast talking about my books.
No.
Speaking of that, is non-zombie, do you have it in print or is it a Kindle?
Well, first of all, I was kidding. We shouldn't spend the entire rest. But second of all, no. I'm finishing the book that I'm writing right now, Hit Girls, and then I'm writing the third non-zombie, and then I'm going to package the 3 of them as a print book.
Very good.
Yeah, so that's going to be my third print book because Hit Girls will come up before that. But anyway, moving
Nice.
swiftly onward.
Yeah. Now, getting back to books, that openings, there were one that I actually noted down, and I don't know if you guys would agree with me. I'm sure Garrett's read. I don't know if you have, Crystal, but The Odyssey for me is one of my favorite books. And the beginning is, you have this poet, or Homer, who wrote it. And he's talking. He's like, sing through me, muse, and tell me the story of, this warrior and blah 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 blah. And just from the first, 3 lines of that book, it totally hooked me. Even though it's written like not in something that I normally like to read. So
I hated The Odyssey,
That's a book
but
that
I have a
definitely
good
hooks me.
excuse.
No, you don't.
No, I hated
What's
The
your excuse?
Odyssey.
I hated Harry Potter, but I had a good excuse.
You know what, though? Harry
No.
Potter was not written in 16th century Spanish. And I actually studied The Odyssey when I lived in Spain. And for whatever fucking reason, the last time it was translated was in, like, the 16th century. So I had to
Wow.
read The Odyssey translated into 16th century Spanish. And
Okay.
it was
Okay.
horrible.
If I read the Odyssey as translated by Benjamin Franklin, I'd fucking hate that.
Exactly. I think I'll give it another try because I actually own a copy.
yeah, I like it. I definitely
Please
like it.
do. And it's the first epic story. Well, not the first, but it's fucking
definitely
early.
there.
The
Yeah.
Iliad is the first.
Well, yeah. But yeah, no. But I mean, it's the basis of so much storytelling. I mean, it was the ancient Greek equivalent of like
Jules Verne.
Indiana Jones. Well,
Or Indiana Jones, yeah.
I was going to say Indiana Jones because he's the dude, and he like runs around and he fucks all the lesbians, and he he's that guy. Pardon me for one moment, Zach. Why don't you take over?
Okay, sure. I'll just comment that because that's what Indiana Jones does. He fucks lesbians a lot.
I'm sure he does.
Indiana Jones is totally, I think, a good example. I personally love those movies, and they hook you right away because you get instantly thrown into, some previous thing that he was doing, trying to get that cross back. And the Last Crusade, you're thrown into when he was like 18 or something. And you're like, dude, this is fucking awesome,
Yeah, I love Indiana Jones. I think that it's over the top stories with lots of characters and lots of things going on done right. Like it
Right,
actually works
exactly.
and it's awesome and you like everything about it. There's nothing that it's so over the top and yet I always love those movies. I mean,
Yeah,
I think the only one I didn't like too much was the Crystal Skull or something like that, the
Yeah,
very last one.
The fourth
Okay.
one. It was a
Yeah.
bit more
I thought
over
you
the
were
top
gonna
than
say
it should
something
be.
like-
Yeah.
The one where his son died.
No, but yeah, no, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
But like for me, my favorite was The Last Crusade, and what really hooked me was that opening scene when he was 18 years old, and you get to see him running across a train and all that.
Mhm.
And it's like that opening, you're instantly like, oh my god, it's Indiana Jones, and he's 18. Oh, and that's how he got the scar on his chin. Oh my god, this is fucking awesome. It's like that's what makes me love those movies because each one starts with something like that, with previous thing that leads
Yeah.
up to it.
I gotta say one thing though about the Crystal Skull, which is that I think that if it had come out a couple of years after the other 3, we would not only would we have thought it was awesome then.
Yeah.
I mean, not that we were alive, but well, Crystal probably was.
Thank you.
No, but I think we would still like it today, and I think why everybody kind of shits on the Crystal Skull, because I watched it. I didn't watch it when it first came out because I was like, oh, new Indiana Jones or whatever. And I watched it more recently, and it's okay, the aliens, like, I agree, I'm a little bit pissed off about that, but, like, why is
interdimensional beings, please?
I'm like, why are aliens any worse than magic? Why did everybody hate that when it was totally fine to have magic and the Holy Grail mysticism stuff in the earlier
Everybody knows the
ones?
Holy Grail is real. What are you talking about?
Right.
Have you not seen the Da Vinci Code?
Dodging that, like, loaded gun. So it's just that Spielberg and Lucas and Harrison Ford and everybody, it's like they've done so much since, and they've progressed so far as filmmakers that when they go back and make a movie that's kind of just like the other ones, we're like, oh well, that was cool so long ago. But honestly, 50 years from now, when somebody watches all of them together, I don't think they'll have a big problem.
See, I disagree.
Yeah.
And here's why I disagree. Because the Crystal Skull, for me, the reason why I didn't like it was, the first part was because it didn't hold to the successful action of using real. It used too many computer graphics for me. Okay, that's one of the main things I really didn't like about it, because with the first three, it had to be all real. Like, I mean, sure, they could do like little Photoshop type things, but it's like you had to have a shitload of crates exploding or something, Right.
Well, that's actually a whole separate.
That's a whole separate thing. So that's my first thing. The second one is that I was totally fine with him being old, but I didn't like the Russians as I mean, you could totally have Russians, but I didn't like the acting of
They were
the Russians.
fake Russians.
What the fuck do you have against Russians?
Oh boy!
Because I don't like the acting of the Russians.
But I argue against that. Like, go back and watch the Nazis, dude. They're not good actors, and they do not do good German accents. If you think they do, that's just because you grew up thinking that's what a German accent sounded like. It's not.
Valid point.
That's totally fine. In the first movie, you had the Germans. In the second movie, you had the Indian guys who were like ripping hearts out of people. And in the third movie, they went back to Nazis, right?
Right.
Now, if you ask what are your favorite two movies out of those three, it's the first and the third. Nobody says, "Oh, my favorite was the Temple of Doom," because it wasn't. Nobody fucking liked that movie.
I like the Temple of Doom. That was my favorite one.
Temple of Doom. We all liked the
Temple of Doom was your favorite Indiana Jones movie?
Yes.
Oh,
I'm quitting this
podcast. I'm booting her.
In my defense, I haven't seen it since I was like 11 years old, but that was my favorite one. But I have to say, my experience watching 80s movies was much different than yours, because at the time I was in Spain and I had to watch them with horrible dubbing. So the German ones didn't. What?
We were both born in '86, so we didn't watch many movies in the '80s.
I was born in '84, so I didn't. I did, because the thing is, in the '90s in Spain, the '80s movies were still coming out.
Gotcha. All right.
Yes. So I watched a lot of 80s movies, and they had horrible dubbing. And the Temple of Doom was like the first movie that I remember where Indiana Jones actually had like a manly voice, and all the characters had like different actors instead of the same guy making voices for them. And the dubbing was actually good. It was professional quality.
I love how that's your status of why you liked it the best.
Yes.
Still, I don't know. Temple of Doom being your favorite, you get a taser. All right.
You've been tased.
I heard that.
Good. I'm still testing. I'm still testing all of my soundboard app shit and everything. Oh, by the way, we did get a live tweet from Chrissy Moss, who said that, yes, Crystal, you are hot. So I guess it's confirmed.
We actually have a watcher. Wow.
Yeah, we do. No, she's really cool. And I just read her book, by the way. It's Flight of the Griffins. You should check it out. It's good. We just shamelessly plug people's books. If we know you, we'll plug your book.
Sure.
It's just gonna happen.
Any new authors, just tweet us and we'll plug your book, right?
We'll be plugging you to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. You're the only people watching. Nobody's listening. We have no audience. So
beginnings. I actually wanted to bring up my book, if I could, real fast. Is my book opens up with, Danny Calloway is this 13-year-old boy, and it opens up with a basically a description of where he is. He lives in Rhode Island, and I pictured it as like a zoom in, like a movie, like almost like it starts out from far and it just slowly zooms into a school. And in the first chapter, you find out that he has this crazy gift for numbers, and some guy's following him with a limp and all these different things. And for me, I felt like that's a great beginning because it keeps, it brings up all these questions right off the bat of, what is this number thing that he has, and who's this guy that's following him and stuff like that.
Dude, that sounds awesome. I should read your book.
You should totally read my book. Weird.
I'm the only one that hasn't read it, I think, here.
Well, the only one out of the three of us.
Yeah, I've read the first 8 chapters to the middle school class here in Miami, and they fucking love it.
That's awesome.
I read the next 4 today. Oh, and they were like, oh my god, I like this and I like that. I was like, oh my god, they were like freaking out. It's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah,
that's so great.
My favorite one again? My favorite chapter?
Which is your? I don't know.
It's
the anyone that.
The fucking shut the fuck up! Don't even say that. You. No, it's the one where he sits on the table and figures out the thing.
Oh, the greenhouse one.
Oh fuck, that was so good. Yeah. Seriously, if you're listening to this in the near
chapter 14 or 13.
If you're listening to this in the near future and like listening to it as a back episode, fucking get Zach's book, because there are like several moments that will have you leap the fuck up.
Yeah, chapter 15 is my favorite because I'm just like, I was writing it, I was holding my breath, I was like, oh my god, I'm holding my breath. Okay, this is good. This is good.
Okay, and we're just fucking like really getting on the self-promotion bandwagon here. So I'm just gonna dive into Crystal's book. Which she sent me actually the whole thing, and I haven't gotten to read the whole thing yet, and I apologize. But your opening scene is fucking awesome.
Thank you.
Except for that one little note that I gave you, where it's like I want to meet the other end, because yours is a romance book, yeah.
Yes.
For a romance book, for the most part, yours is perfect. It doesn't have, and it shouldn't have, some like big action sequence. There's no huge massive mystery. I mean there is, but there isn't. Like, you want to know more about the main character, but like there's no like she was missing her left hand and what happened to her left hand. There's nothing like that. It's just beautiful. Like, your prose is fucking awesome, and
Thank you.
And it's romance. That's appropriate. Like, people want to read it and be like, oh, this countryside sounds so awesome. Oh, the Duke looks so handsome. The Duke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that it's it depends on taste, but I actually love Victorian era books. And if you look at Jules Verne, I think he's Victorian era, right? The original Sherlock Holmes, even Agatha Christie, which is a little bit post-Victorian. I think she was more Edwardian, if I'm not mistaken, but her stuff is like based a lot in the Victorian era. The beginning of the book, like the first chapter, is like 40 pages, and it's just description upon description. So I think I carried that into my story quite a bit, and so I've had to kind of trim it down a bit, because it's nice, but after a while you're like, okay, what's going on? I need to meet the characters. I want to know what's going to happen with this book and where it's going, right? So I've been editing it per your suggestions, and what I've done is I've compressed the first chapter to just what the person needs to know, so that they know where they are, what's going on, who Navilla is, which is the main character, and then I jump straight into the plot. And basically, the second chapter is kind of meeting Joaquin and just getting to know him and figuring out that why they're both telepathic and being inside each other's mind and having to communicate without even wanting to, right? So it just goes from there, and then that goes straight into the action.
Right.
But I think one of the funny things about that story is the fact that I'm having to finish it with a totally different perspective than when I started it. Because when I started writing that story, I was single, and I had never had a serious relationship. And now I'm putting the finishing touches, and I've been married for a few years. Mm-hmm. So it's totally changed my perspective. But, I know there's definitely a market for it. And everybody that's read it so far has really, really enjoyed it. So it's just a matter of trimming it down and getting it so that it's concise enough that people can go where they want to go with the story, and it's not too much.
Right, which it is good, and I can't wait for that to happen. But going back to that thing that you said of getting into the plot, that's another point on beginnings. Imagine if at the beginning of Star Wars, the ships had just kept flying, and they just kind of like faded off into the distance. Imagine if at the beginning of The Matrix, the numbers just kept going and kept going and kept going.
Right.
You can have the best beginning, opening scene, opening shot in the world, but if you don't progress past that, you're going to lose your audience. And if your beginning is subtle and mysterious, you need to amp up. If your beginning is boom, boom, rat-tat, boom, everything's exploding in all directions, you need to ramp down. You need to be like, okay, so now let's all take a breather. Everybody chill the fuck out. Reload your gun.
A good example of that, Garrett, is the beginning of Mission Impossible 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you have Tom Cruise as, spoiler alert, Tom Cruise is in it. Tom Cruise in the beginning,
and he does all his stunts.
Yeah, Tom Cruise in the beginning of that movie. I'm not that big of a fan of Mission Impossible, but that movie, he's taped to a chair. Mm-hmm. And he's just like crying, and you see that his wife has been kidnapped. That's the opening shot, and he's like, I'm gonna shoot your wife. I'm gonna count to 10 if you don't tell me what this is. He's like, no, and he goes through this insane emotional range.
Right.
And and you are literally on the edge of your seat, holding your breath, like, oh my god, shitting your pants, and it's boom, and you just. Split, it's a pause on him,
mm-hmm.
and then it cuts to, like 24 hours earlier, and you're like, holy fucking Christ, I just had a heart attack.
And it's like, and everything's chill, and he's cool, and he's like working with his agency, and you're like,
how
do we get from here to what we just saw?
Exactly.
Because that's crazy.
I think he was having a dinner party when it cut. Like, he's like, hey, I'll go get the ice. And I was like,
what?
I personally think that is one of the greatest opening scenes that I've seen.
Yeah, totally. Totally it is. Totally, yeah. Yeah, it is.
It is. I'm going to get some water. I'll be right back.
Seriously? In the middle of an episode?
In the middle. Yep.
You just, don't even announce it, right? Don't say anything, because people are going to be listening to the podcast. Just walk away.
Exactly. Just walk away. He'll come back with, a beer and some popcorn, chew it while we talk.
Yeah, I hate both of you. I didn't get to run out and get beer while I was trying to set all this shit up.
Oh, darn.
No, it is darn. Screw you.
That was fast. What did you drink, Zach? A little shot of vodka?
Seriously, Zach, just next time, just don't say anything. Because people are going to be
walk away.
The podcast. They don't need to hear that you're going to get water. Just mute your microphone, get up.
I have fans out there that want to know what I'm doing, okay? So Chrissy wants to know what I'm doing.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
So I have a question for you guys. Have you seen The Hunger Games?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And have you read the book?
Yes. Yes, I have.
I have not read the book. I started to, and I hated it.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, what did you think about the... Okay, go ahead.
I hated it because I hate first-person, present tense narrative, especially when it's a teenage girl.
I love it.
But Katniss isn't a normal teenage girl. She's angry and
She's still a teenage girl.
Has to fend for herself.
She's still a teenage girl.
She is still a teenage girl.
I kissed what's his fucking name?
You kissed a guy? That sucks.
No, PETA. I kissed PETA. I'm thinking of Liam or whatever the fuck his name is. It's so inner monologue, teenage girl bitchy drama that I was just and I just don't like that narrative anyway. I step into the room, I flip on a light switch. It's no, I want to hear about something that happened in the past to somebody else. That's just what I like. I can't think of a first person narrative book that I enjoyed actually.
See, I can't think of a first person narrative book that I've read besides Hunger Games, and that's why I liked it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one that I've read that's first narrative. And I loved The Hunger Games. I loved it.
Yeah. And when I first picked it up, I was reading it, and I was like, this is awesome. I have never read first person, present time, acting currently. That's what I liked about it.
First person present tense. I can think of first person past tense.
And so what did you guys think about the beginning of the movie? I thought it was great. You liked the beginning? I hated the beginning of The Hunger Games. Hated it.
Really?
Hold on, real
Because
quick. Remind me of what happens in the beginning.
I think the opening, I'm not sure if this is exactly like the first opening scene, but it's basically like a camera strolling through like the forest area and then going into District 13. And there's just basically a bunch of shabby looking buildings and people kind of inside looking, and they all look like they're wearing clothes from the 80s, like the Amish, not Amish, but Mormons from the 80s, you know, and they're kind of there, and you just basically get the idea that there's this poor place. And actually, no, you know what? Before that, there's 5 minutes of narrative explaining the Capitol and everything that happened.
Right. So, yeah,
I think that's the beginning. Yeah, it's a whole explanation that kind of sets the background for it.
I thought it was that, and then hunting the deer, and then into the town with the Mormons, Amish.
Yeah, well, before the deer, she was talking with her sister. I thought it opens up with her sister.
Does it?
Wow. Why are we talking about this? We don't know.
I remember liking it.
I did not like the beginning at all. I thought it was just ridiculous. I felt like it framed everything wrong. I feel like people that watched the Hunger Games, because of that beginning, did not really experience the story as the author intended with the book.
Sure. Well, the author was
book had more
with the making of the film. Was involved with the making of the film. Just wanna.
Right, but the film also is a film. It's 2 hours. Right. It's not an entire book.
Yeah.
I thought they did very well at the adaptation, but you know, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about beginnings.
Yeah, I can't say if they did a good adaptation, but I can say that I fucking loved that movie. Loved that movie. Like, walked out, went to a bookstore, and was like, I gotta read this fucking book. Wait, it sucks. Like,
wow, really? I think if you would have read the book first and liked it.
No, I can't say that the book sucks because it's the same story. So I love that story, and I love Katniss. I just don't like hearing every single fucking thing she's saying, because my characters, I like them funny, I like them really smart, and I like them witty. If I'm inside the head of a funny, witty person, I'm fine with that. If I'm inside the head of a more stoic person, I'm just like, shut the fuck up, have some fun, call him a dickhead. Like,
and you read all the Twilight books?
Yeah, well, they're not good books, okay? They're not good books.
Which is why I read all of them.
But I don't mind reading about a stoic personality from the outside. I just don't want to be in their head. That's what it is, you know what I mean? Katniss isn't like, you know, I punched Liam in the dick because he looked at me funny. It's just... okay. So that's a nice way to segue into beginnings. Not.
Punch him in the dick.
The beginning of their love. No, here's some good advice for, you know, all of the vast numbers of people listening to us out there. Think of the beginning of your story like the opening chords to a song. That's what it's like. You know, there's some songs you can hear the first just strum on the guitar and you're just like, oh, and you turn your radio up and you lean in and that sort of thing. It's that grab your audience and bring them into whatever it's going to be. If it's a slower, more contemplative piece, then your opening chords are going to be a little more rounded out and spaced apart and more mellow. And if it's like designed to fling them into the mosh pit and throw their body around, then you're going to start off playing with a tempo of 200 and really, really crank your volume up to 11.
Right.
I'm not a musician, so yeah, and also I just have to say, I really, you know, make sure your world building is working in the beginning of your chapter, because I personally hate it when I jump into, even if it's just the first chapter and I have no idea what the fuck the world is, still so annoying to me.
And I'd say the more different your world, no, that's correct. The more different your world is from our world, the earlier on and the better you've got to do your world building.
Right. Yeah, definitely the earlier on.
I love the beginning of Ender's Game because he's already letting you know what's going on in like the first couple sentences. So that's obviously a clear example of.
Right.
See what I did there?
I saw what you did.
Shitting all over Ender's Game. Okay, real quick, we're getting close to the hour-long mark. What did you guys think about the opening of Lord of the Rings? I'll kill both of you if you say a single fucking thing.
Are you asking about the book or the movie?
I was referring to the book, but the movie's good too.
I do not remember at all. Like, to me, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings is one massive blur with a bunch of Tolkien language.
Mm-hmm.
So
you don't want to talk about the books. I can talk about.
I'm bailing out of this.
Remind me what the
Crystal.
Remind me, Garrett. Remind me what the beginning of Lord of the Rings movie was.
The beginning of the Lord of the Rings movie? Well, that was. One sec. Excuse me. That was the voice of Galadriel, the White Elf Queen, explaining what happened, and Sauron, and you see the guy cut the ring off the other guy's finger.
I like that. I love that. I love that. Yeah. That totally comes back to me now. I loved it.
And that was vitally necessary for those films. Like,
yes.
Just based on the fact that millions of people saw them and very few of them, read the books, you had to have something like that because there's, they would never stick around or pay the price of the movie ticket. But I was referring to the books. Do you remember the books?
Do you really want to talk about this?
Probably not. We should just.
We already got into this before, and
Crystal gets a taser. And you both get a pipe. Nice. Somebody bail us off onto another subject quick.
Good. I actually have a TV shows. The Walking Dead for me. The Walking Dead. The beginning of The Walking Dead I thought was great. And the reason why is because you're introduced to your main character, Rick, who is a law officer, and you get an idea of where he is. He's he's a sheriff, right?
Law officer
and
makes him
law
sound
officer,
like an attorney.
He is. He's a sheriff, and he and you get an idea where he's in. I'm not gonna. He's in some town, okay, and things happen, and basically he's thrown into the zombie apocalypse,
right.
Because several weeks of his life are summed up in 3 shots because of what happens. I'm not going to spoil it for people because I think it's a great opening. But if you haven't seen The Walking Dead, I would definitely at least go watch the first episode. I am not a zombie guy. I am not a horror fan. Horror fan. But
number one.
Horror.
I'm addicted to The Walking Dead, and I think the opening is great. I do
not watch the TV series because I read the comic books, and that was already too depressing for me. But I can space myself out on the comic books. If I start watching the TV series, I'm going to watch every fucking episode every week, and I'm going to walk around the whole rest of the week feeling terrible about myself and about the world in general.
That's different.
The comic, well, that's for other reasons. But the comics, I can do whatever I want. I can stop reading. I can pause in between issues. I can do whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. The comics and the comics and the TV show are actually different. People that die in the comics don't die, when they're supposed to in the movie or in the show. So
people die. Fucking spoiler alert!
I know,
Jack.
right? Another classic opening is Jaws.
Yeah.
Great opening. With, it's just kind of silhouetted, the 2 people running down onto the beach, and the boy, kind of passes out, and then the girl jumps in naked, and then done. It's like, oh, what happened? You don't even see the bad guy.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know why you never saw the shark, right? I have to interject this.
Tell us.
Something like that?
Broke.
Yeah,
the shark was broken. They designed this whole animatronic shark, which was supposed to be awesome, and it just broke. So Spielberg was like, what the fuck am I going to do? And he redesigned the whole movie so that you hardly ever saw the shark. And it turned out being pants-shittingly terrifying because it's like, where is it? If you see it behind the people, then you're like, oh, well, I know where it is. But if you don't know where it is, but you know it's there, it's terrifying.
Yeah. I read an article on it, and apparently it broke 1 million times. It broke every other day.
Yeah.
And he kept having to just make edits and just make it so that they use the animatronic as little as possible.
And
which
it
is funny.
Almost killed George Lucas too. George Lucas came down to visit the set, And Spielberg was like, hey, check out the animatronic shark. And he was like, dude, this is pretty cool. And he's like, hey, yeah, check it out. Stick your head inside it. He's like, okay. Fucking thing fell and got stuck. Like,
Really?
it almost bit him in half. And then he was stuck in it, and they had to get, like, the jaws of life and shit to pull him out. Or
and then we wouldn't have Indiana Jones 4, so that would have been...
And then we wouldn't have the fucking prequels. Or we would, but... Okay, don't get me started. This is a really good time to wrap up because we're at the hour mark anyway, and you just almost got me started on the prequels.
We'll talk about prequels and sequels later.
We need like a dozen fucking episodes before our fans will be ready to withstand me raging on the prequels. All right, guys. So this was fun. I'm glad it only took us 2 hours to get set up. And it'll be smoother next time, and hopefully for our dedicated fans, it will also be smoother next time. This has been the Storytelling Podcast. I don't even know how to wrap. I need to write an outro for this thing. You can see my blog at GBR0Binson. It's like GB Robinson, but with a 0. It's the worst URL ever. You can visit Zach's website at vcbolger.com. And Crystal, you probably don't have one, do you?
I don't have a website yet.
Okay, you will.
Well, I have a website for my nonfiction, but...
We'll get a dick on it.
Yes.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
Bye.
See you next time.